Here's the second reading for the Corpora 1 session by myself and Hinrichs and Szmrecsanyi from 2007. And we've already worked with a data set in our class, so I'll try not to spend too much time on my definition of the research problem, but the bare minimum is this. There's an alternation in standard English between the way that possessives are grammatically formulated. One is the option above here, the so-called S genitive, where a possessor comes first. Then you have the genitive S, eclitic, or however you want to refer to that. There's a theoretical debate around that. We're not interested in that. We just call it the S genitive, and then followed by the possessum. And in the alternative, the off genitive, the order of the two noun phrases is reversed. You have the possessum first, then you have an off, and then you have the possessor noun phrase. Theoretically, in any given instance, speakers and writers have a choice which construction they're going to choose, and we're interested in what the constraints are that frame their choices and influence their choices, and which constraints are the most important ones. We're using the same data that we showed in the video on Hunt and Meyer for corpora, reflecting both British and American English at both a 1960s and a 1990s time slice, except this time we're not using multiple genres. We're really only using A and B, so reportage and editorial. So that's the first two of the three press language categories. We begin with a question whether there's alternation and any changes that are observable. Just briefly, the most important change we're looking at is that over time the S genitive increases in both British and American English. But is this a trend that we can link to colloquialization? We'll leave that question open for now, but the answer is not really, because it's not clear whether the S or the off is really more spoken language like. This is descriptive analysis now, so before we go into multivariate, and that's really the main reason why I'm showing this. It's, if I say so myself, an exemplary study in how it proceeds from exploratory data analysis and univariate analyses and significance testing to a second step where everything is put into the model and looked at in multivariate analysis. This whole procedure was completely unknown to me when we wrote this paper, but Benedict freed me from my ignorance. Benedict, how come that in 2006 you were already familiar with this multivariate regression, and that was without using VARB rule?
Yes, that's because I used regression analysis in my PhD dissertation, which I turned in 2005. So.
And just came to you?
Yeah, I studied economics as a minor, besides linguistics, and at the time economics had a more quantitative orientation than linguistics, at least in student training, so I had some rudimentary understanding of multivariate analysis, and could build on that to acquire the necessary skills to conduct my PhD research.
So then one day you got on a bus, went to town and bought a copy of SPSS.
That's right.
And started doing multivariate regression analysis yourself.
That's right.
And as such, you've been an agent of change in our field with all your works and that have been quite influential. And people look to that. And it's been a part of the transition away from VARB rule, doing things. What VARB rule is already. It's a multivariate procedure, but it has problems that we're not going to go into it. So, I was going to talk about the change over time. This is the table above gives the same information that the bar chart below gives. it shows how both in American English, from brown to frown, and in British English, from lob to flob, and this is just the press data, the frequency, the proportional share of the S genitive in this alternation increases. So this is the variationist approach, really, as opposed to the corpus linguistic approach that we looked at in Hund and Meyer. There's always an alternative that is implied. When we look at the proportion of the S genitive, if this is 36.2% S genitive, then the implication is that the remaining 63.8% are off genitives. This implied some very tedious manual data extraction. How long did it take us? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't know.
About a year. We had 4 student helpers. It involved searching for every instance of a genitive S.
It was a long, hard slog.
Yes, it was. But we were young.
It was worth it.
It was worth it, yeah. And we were young. We needed the money. So we came up with a large data set, 8,300 tokens. Well, really, we didn't have anything else to do. That's what happened. This is the Adamancy coding scheme. So every noun, as part of the manual coding, every noun was looked at, and a human coder decided whether the noun was a concrete human.
Just the possessor.
Just the possessor. The possessor head nouns.
Yep.
So we had a computer script extract that,
Mm-hmm.
and we just looked at the head noun. So the coding level 1 was for a concrete human, level 2 for an animal, level 3 for a collective of people, level 4 inanimates. So this factor, as a factor, it's a 4-level factor. It's not a scalar factor because this is not read numerically, but it's a 4-level factor. And this is one of these, I'm not showing all preliminary analyses, but this is one of these univariate descriptive analyses where for every corpus, for every subsection of our data, we're showing a mean animacy level for the S genitives and the mean animacy for the off genitives. So what this shows you is that in every instance, the S genitives have a lower animacy coding than the off genitives. And this tells me that I need to take back what I just said. Really, this here was a numeric factor. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 were taken as integers. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible to form averages.
Yeah. It's sort of ordinal.
Yeah.
It's not entirely. We did calculate mean values, but it's not.
We shouldn't have.
Entirely orthodox. Well, why not?
You can do it. It's exploratory.
Yes.
At least it's showing a clear tendency. The S genitives have a consistently lower mean animacy code than the off genitives, and that's not surprising because the lower values stand for more animate things.
Yeah.
So that's one way of doing exploratory data analysis. Is it really univariate? It's not really univariate. It has both levels of the dependent variable, the S and the off, and then really it has corpus as a variable, and it has animacy in there. So it's showing the dependent analyzed as depending on 2 of the independents. This is one independent, and the animacy is another independent.
Mm.
It's not the barest minimum of how this could have been done.
It is descriptive stats.
It is descriptive, yes.
Yeah.
But it's not as simple as it could be
be
one less level.
Yes.
Yeah. So end weight is an important one to understand. End weight is a discourse principle whereby speakers and writers, whenever they have a choice, they like to arrange constituents and phrasal constituents in such a way that the longer ones come last in their utterances. So when they're constructing a possessive and the possessum is longer, the theory postulate that the possessed sum would be placed second, which implies choice of the S genitive. But when the possessor noun phrase has more words, then the off genitive can be preferred. Again, that's just one of a bunch of factors that influences choice. But we included possessum length and possessor length as separate factors, as separate predictors. We just saw another genitive study over the weekend at N-Wave that didn't do that. They didn't include possessum length and possessor length in number of words. They included possessor length minus possessum length. So the difference as a predictor. Why didn't we do that, Benedict?
That's a bit. It's an empirical question. In most cases, including two separate variables for weight yields better statistical fit in multivariate analysis. There's nothing wrong with including a combined ratio variable or a subtracting the one from the other, but I think it's more complete, less lossy to include both.
It says more
factors. Yes,
you can explain more that way. So here is one of them in exploratory data analysis, the possessor length, and it works just like the Adamancy measure worked. What it shows us is, for example, the S genitives in the Brown corpus on average are 1.83 words long, but the off genitives are 2.83 words long. So if that isn't going to be a significant difference, so what it shows is that the longer the possessors are, the more likely the choice of an off genitive becomes. And again, that tendency is consistent over all four corpora. Like I said, I'm not introducing all of them. This is the result table from the multivariate analysis where all of our factors were included. By the way, Benedict, did you exclude any insignificant ones? Is this the final model? So, see, given this is still in there, but it's not significant, right? So in other words, did you have versions of the model with even more variables in it?
No, I do. I think I actually don't know why these variables are still in the model now in 2015.
And you did this in 2005?
I did this in 2005. Now you would more consistently exclude insignificant factors and report a so-called minimal adequate model, but in this case I didn't do that.
We just kept all of our predictors in, and we were delighted that the vast majority of them
the variety and time, they're insignificant as main effects, but they partake in statistically significant interaction terms. This is why that is still in. Length of the possessum phrase is also part of an interaction effect, if I remember correctly. Givenness, I don't know, is that?
I don't think givenness ever popped in anything, so that would be the only one.
Okay, so nowadays you would exclude givenness, but the other things must stay in the model because we have those interaction effects.
Yeah, and I'm not showing the interactions in this summary presentation, but whenever you do have an interaction effect in your model, you're basically obliged to also keep the participating effects in there as main effects. And rather than effect sizes, this visualization shows effect contribution to model fit, or the effect strength, the effect explanatory power.
Explanatory power.
So adamancy explains the most.
Mhm.
And that's not surprising. That's rather satisfyingly in line with intuition, because the one rule that everybody knows about genitive choice in English is that when the possessor is animate, you choose the S genitive. You say, "That's my dad's car." You rarely say, "That is the car of my dad," unless something is wrong with you. That's the rule that most people are familiar with, and that does pop as the most important one in our model. But right next to it in importance is length of the possessor, so one of the two factors that contribute to the end weight principle, and that's one that nobody ever talks about, but everybody uses. Native speakers just know that rule. So whenever, when there's a medium level animacy in the possessor head noun, length of possessor can certainly tip the scale. So can all the others when the other factors are controlled for. So that's probabilistic grammar for you. We conclude that there is an economization rather than colloquialization going on over time from the 60s to the 90s. What that means is, well, it's not colloquialization because neither of the two genitives is clearly more colloquial, but there is an economization going on because the S genitive increases in frequency, and the S genitive is the more economical variant of the two, because you save a word when you use, you save two syllables when you choose the S genitive. The administration's plans versus the plans of the administration. You have an extra the and an extra of in the second option. So it's more economical to use this. And in press language, that's very pertinent, because over the course of the 20th century, there is what Doug Biber has described as an information explosion. Journalists have been forced to include ever more amounts of information and ever decreasing amounts of space in what they get to publish and in the venues where they publish. So more economical options are increasingly popular if you look at the course of the 20th and the beginning of the current century. And I was just looking at it, we invest almost a whole page on making the methodological point that our findings wouldn't have been possible in traditional univariate procedures if we had only used the exploratory data analysis, because you have to control for the influence of other factors when you look at each factor's individual contribution to the result. And by the way, that's a very frequently cited part of the paper, the methodological argument at the end.
Is it?
It is.
That's a good point.
It's a great point. I think you made it. It's you said that multivariate analysis and regression analysis is the closest that a corpus linguist can come to conducting a controlled lab experiment, and if I may paraphrase. So, do you have any closing thoughts on this study?
I think that would be about it.
Well, thank you.